joined in the studio by Darren Farrell. Darren is an award-winning writer and illustrator of children's books. He's originally from North Carolina, but has spent a lot of time living and working in New York. He has been living with his wife and son in Seoul for the past couple of years, and his first book is currently available. It's called Doug Dennis and the Flyaway Fib, and Darren is also working on several new projects at the moment. Welcome to the show, Darren. It's great to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, how are you today?
I'm great.
Well, I just saw you sketching away in the lobby there. So you're always working, I take it?
Always working, yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about the various things that you've been working on, your books and the new projects that you have coming out. But first, can you tell us what brought you to Korea in the first place? How did you end up here?
So my wife, she had the opportunity to move here to help open a school. Mm-hmm. She worked in New York at the Woodside Preschool, and so she had the opportunity to come here and work for Dwight Soul.
Oh, really?
She just opened last year. And so she runs the kindergarten and preschool.
And so that's what brought you to Korea in the first place?
Yes.
How long have you been here now?
So we've been here about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. And you were living in New York directly before you came?
Yeah, we were in New York. We lived there for about 12 years. And then...
What's the transition like from New York to Seoul? How's it been?
It was surprising. New York is such a condensed city. And so we could walk everywhere. You can cover so much ground and visit so many places in a couple of blocks.
Yeah.
And we moved to Seoul, and I was looking at the map before we moved here. I'm like, oh yeah, I could walk there, And, wow, this is one huge spread out city. So it's been tough to navigate. There's so much to be involved with and to learn about.
Yeah, and you're still learning, I take it. You've been 2 years, okay.
Even today, I got off the subway. I have never walked the opposite direction in Myeongdong Station.
Oh,
so I always
really?
walk the other way. So I was kind of like wandering up toward Namsan Peak, and then I'm like, okay, that's the wrong way. And,
well, it's good that you saw another part of the city on your way over.
Beautiful.
Now, you illustrate and write children's books. Can you tell us, how did that begin? Were you always interested in illustrating and writing?
I went to journalism school, so from a young age, I enjoyed drawing a little bit, but mostly writing and being really silly and trying to make other people laugh. And that's kind of my introduction into writing and children's books. So I went to journalism school, and I focused on advertising. So I thought that sounded like a fun way to get paid, to be funny, and to like make people laugh and to tell these little stories. And that was like my introduction into making little stories and creating lots of ideas.
Were you like one of the Mad Men guys? Was it like that?
No.
No? Okay. Things have changed, I guess, in the past couple of decades. Well, perhaps could you introduce your first book for us? I mentioned the name, but can you tell us what it is and tell us a little about the story?
Yeah, so Doug Dennis and the Flyaway Fib stars a sheep and an elephant. And they're best friends.
Doug Dennis is a sheep.
He's a sheep.
With very stylish shoes as well, I might add.
He likes to play basketball.
He does.
In stories.
And his best friend is...
He's an elephant named Ben Bobby, who strangely has hair and no giant elephant ears and wears a hat.
Okay. And what's the story? What's the basic premise of their adventure together?
So it kind of all starts one day when they're really bored, super bored, and so they decide to go to the circus. And while they're there, Ben Bobby orders a big tub of popcorn, and Doug Dennis sneakily eats all of it. And then Ben Bobby, he sort of gets angry, and he's like, hey, who ate all my popcorn? And Doug Dennis decides to tell a fib and say that he did not do it. And from there, the fib grows and grows, and Doug Dennis literally gets carried away out of the circus, out of town, around the world, and out into outer space. And that's kind of where all the other people who tell great big lies end up. And so the story is kind of about how he learns to feel sorry and sort of be sad that he tricked his best friend, and how he learns how important it is to tell the truth.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's a great message as well. It's a great moral. What inspired you to create those two characters in the first place? Was it a lightning strike of inspiration, or where did they come from?
Well, I just, the characters in the book could probably have been anything. And I picked two of my favorite animals, sheep and an elephant.
Sheep and elephants, they're your favorite animals?
Yeah, I think so.
Why are sheep and elephants your favorite animals?
I just think sheep are really cute, and I would love to have a couple of sheep just to pet. I think they would be better than dogs. And elephants are just really smart, and I think they're beautiful creatures as well.
Okay. Have you ever seen any sheep in the real life up close? Have you visited a farm?
Actually, after this book came out, I was invited to the Sheep and Wool Festival in New York. York. So we saw a lot of sheep being sheared and just hanging out. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get to have a go yourself?
No. That looked pretty rough.
Okay.
Pretty scary.
Well, Doug Dennis and Ben Bobby, they're great characters. They've got a lot of personality. Do you think they'll have more adventures together? Will they come back again?
I would like to have another adventure with them, but the next couple of books that I've been working on, the one that comes out this summer is called Thank You Octopus.
Yeah.
So it stars a boy and an octopus. And then the next one, that will be my third book, it stars a bear.
A bear.
And the moon.
So you're clearly attracted to sort of animal stories.
You know, the funny thing is, originally Doug Dennis was a boy, and he had an elephant for a friend. And then some way along the revisions, he turned into a sheep.
He became a sheep.
Yeah.
Maybe was the sheep more fun to draw? Was it more exciting to draw a sheep?
Yeah, it was definitely more fun to draw a sheep and kind of like make a sheep with giant basketball, tennis shoes, and things like that.
Who did you write it for? I know it's a children's book, but did you have a specific audience in mind, or?
I really, when I write, I try to write for myself. I try to do things that will make me laugh and that I think are funny and fun to read, and then I slowly introduce it to the world. So I show my wife, and I see if she thinks it's funny. Then my son, and then my mom, and then my friends. And so then I just hope, if they all like it, then I hope everyone else will.
So your wife and your son, they're your first critics? Yeah. They're the first audience?
Yeah.
And how do they usually respond?
My wife is very tough. She's very tough on me. Which is good. I need that.
Yeah, she's a tough audience.
Yeah. But which makes me mad initially, but then I realize it's...
what about your son? How does he react? Does he support Dad?
He's good. He's usually... He's
a little bit more...
They're both tough, though.
And you mentioned the moral aspect of the story, so I think that's quite interesting. Was that a deliberate choice that you wanted to tell a moral story for children?
You know, that story just has an innate moral... the original idea for Doug Dennis was that... when people tell a fib, it's often called hot air, like you're full of hot air. And so I just thought it would be really fun and funny if someone's cartoon speech balloon filled up with hot air and they were, sort of dragged away off into space. And so that sort of has a moral quality built into it. So you're going to tell a fib and you're going to be taken away from everything out into dark space, away from your friend. It sort of mimics what happens when you tell a real lie. So clearly you're going to have to figure out a way to come back down to earth and apologize. So it's sort of got that intrinsic, arc built into it, literally, and,
Were you a fibber when you were a child?
I was a pretty honest child, I think. But, yeah.
What about, is your son a fibber? Does he tell the occasional fib?
Only when it has to do with candy.
Okay.
We never gave him any candy until we moved to Seoul. And then, all the halmanis and halbajis to give out candy on the subway. So he started eating a lot of candy. So now he'll sneak away and try to eat candy.
Well, how do you feel about writing in general? Do you think, you said that your son and your wife are quite tough critics, but is the actual process of writing, is it quite easy for you? Is it ever a lonely experience?
I love, the part that's really fun is coming up with ideas and starting to develop the ideas. So that's always fun. And I'll get back to the lonely question in a minute.
Okay.
But, as far as being hard, there's a author named Chuck Klosterman that I really love.
Klosterman,
And he's just a hilarious writer. But I saw him speak one time, and he said something that always stuck with me, and that happens to me almost in every project, which is that there comes a time in anything that he's writing where he hates it, and he thinks he's the worst writer on the planet. And this is a guy who's just a very, very well-respected author. And he hates it, and he thinks he's the worst writer ever. And, so... that happens to me as well. So there are definitely frustrating parts to writing. You just have to take a little break, come back to it with fresh eye, and you'll hopefully
You just need a little time away from it before you can sort of reconcile yourself to that.
Yeah.
What about the lonely part? Is it lonely?
Usually, I wish I had more time so that I could feel lonely. I always feel like I don't have enough time to work on things. Okay. So loneliness isn't a problem. I usually work in coffee shops. I work at a coffee shop, and my next book actually gave it a little shout out in the art note, because I sit there almost all day, every day.
Oh, really?
It's called Coffee Temple in Seoul, and it's just a great place.
So they've got a little reference in the book. Okay.
I said, my art note said, created with a lot of TLC from my window seat at Coffee Temple.
Oh, wow. Okay, they'll be over the moon.
They're great, yeah.
So you enjoyed writing your stories as well, but when you were a child, did you like reading illustrated books?
Yeah, I mean, my mom used to read me a lot of Dr. Seuss. We used to read Hop on Pop. I can remember reading with them, and I don't remember this, but my mom and my family always tell me that when I was a baby, if I were crying or upset, as a little baby, someone could just pick me up and literally read the dictionary or an encyclopedia, and I would stop crying and I would be okay. So,
right. Do you have a good vocabulary now? Do you think it worked?
I'm not sure if that part of it worked, but definitely had a love for words that kept growing.
Well, do you can you remember the first picture book you read? Is there a particular favorite that stayed with you?
I definitely remember reading Hop on Pop.
Hop on Pop. From
Dr. Seuss with my mom.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that my grandmother, she taught English, and so sometimes she brought home this version of There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly.
Oh, yes.
Really strangely illustrated, and I used to ask a lot of questions about that book.
Oh, really? You like that one?
Yeah.
What about now? Do you have some favorite examples of the genre, favorite writers that are working now or that have inspired you when you were starting your career?
I mean, I definitely still love picking up new picture books, and I'm always searching and always reading new authors and illustrators. John Clausen is like...
John Clausen.
Somebody that I just love everything that he makes. He did Not My Hat and...
Not My Hat?
Yeah. I brought a couple... Anyway, but... and then I just picked up a new book in Thanks Books this week called Slush Mountain.
Slush Mountain.
And it's by an author named Bjorn Rue Lai. Really beautiful book, really beautiful art.
Really? What drew you to those particular writers?
Clausen, his artwork has got so much depth, and but it's still very simple and clean, and I don't know, there's just, I like his artwork, and Mo Willems is another person that I have always loved. Everything he does, he's just hilarious, and his characters are, always striking, amazing poses. Which
really? So the poses of the characters, is that something that you look for that inspires you?
Facial expressions. He does, just really simple but beautiful facial expressions. And there's also an artist named Oliver Jeffers that inspired me along the way. He's an Irish guy that lives in New York now, but his work is always beautiful.
All right. Well, excellent. Perhaps we can check some of those out. How was it getting the first book published? I know that you're working on your second book and you've even got plans for the third one after that. But what was it like, the experience of getting the first book out there published?
It was a very long process. And I'm glad that I did not know what I was getting into when I first started. It was a very long process, and it just, I didn't originally intend to illustrate the book. That sort of happened along the way because I have a writing background and I don't have an art background, so I just didn't think I would be able to do that. I didn't think that the industry would be looking for...
really?
This kind of like weird illustration style just popped out of nowhere.
Yeah,
So that was a fun part of the process.
So did you write the whole story first and then the illustrations came later?
Yeah, actually, when I first started writing Doug Dennis, I probably wrote an entire chapter book. And then kept studying books that were out, and Where the Wild Things Are particularly inspired me to boil down the text to just as few sentences as possible. So that was a part of the writing process, just learning how short a picture book needs to be and how important each word is.
And you're working on another book now about tell us about the new book. What's the next book about?
So the next book is called Thank You Octopus.
Thank You Octopus. And is it for the same age group? I guess I should tell us, is there a particular age range that the book's aimed at?
Yeah, Doug Dennis, I didn't really have an age range in mind, but it naturally oriented itself to like 4.5 till 7 or up. And so when I would read to young children, 4 and under. So like if I was in a class of 3-year-olds, that's a little bit abstract and a little bit hyperbolic. And so I would get questions like, but that doesn't really happen when you tell a fib, right? Like you don't float away into space, right?
They were going home scared to their parents.
And I'm like, no, you're right about that. So naturally it just didn't children that young didn't gravitate toward Doug Dennis. But Thank You, Octopus, and the next book that I'm working on are a little bit more straightforward, but still humorous. So hopefully they'll be appealing to that age as well.
It sounds like the humor is an important part of the work for you.
So far.
I
probably have a few deep books inside of me, but I just enjoy making kids laugh and being funny.
Well, I wanted to ask you about some of the workshops that you've done. Like, I know you did a workshop on Nami Island for some school kids. What's that experience been like, taking your book on the road?
Yeah, it's always fun to see, especially being in Korea. I was very curious to see how different children from around the world reacted to the book, because I did tons of reading in and around New York. And so I knew which parts of the book kids generally thought were funny and which parts they were more quiet and listening during. So I've been to a bunch of the schools in Seoul, and yeah, Doug Dennis has been okay. It was a little harder to comprehend, I think, because it's so abstract, like I said, and because it's a little bit more hyperbolic, and also because the jokes are sometimes a little more colloquial to the U.S., maybe.
Okay.
But the Thank You, Octopus is a little bit more straightforward, and the humor is still there. So that one I had a lot of fun reading in Seoul.
What has the general response been like from the Korean audience, the Korean marketplace, after it was translated? Doug Dennis.
I think really well. So yeah, the book came out in Korea, and that was just a surprise to me. My wife is Korean, and her parents are Korean, so it was really great for them to be able to read Doug Dennis in their native language.
Yeah.
And I guess I've heard from friends that have been on different blogs and websites that when the book came out, it was very well received, and like a lot of people were blogging about it. And I have another friend that said they saw it on some government website here that they're promoting, the government was promoting it for some reason, but we haven't been able to track that down.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So it sounds good.
Yeah, that does sound good, yeah.
But I don't know how the translation, I know that even the title changed. So in Korea, instead of Doug Dennis and the Flyaway Fib, the Korean title is King of Liars.
King of Liars.
Which does not sound as funny.
That sounds a little bit more intimidating than Doug Dennis and the Flyaway Lie. What about, can you give us some advice for, I know that there's some aspiring writers and illustrators out there. Can you give them some advice or some tips on how to get motivated or get their career going?
Yeah, I mean, like, for me, I think what worked for me is just make something that I love. Share it with your friends. See if they love it. That's a good start.
Yeah,
and when you're happy, once you've created something that you love and your friends seem to like and your family seems to like, I think the most important step is to get an agent. To get an agent that supports you and really works hard to like get you out there. So that was an important part for me. It took me a long time to get a book to a place where I thought an agent would like it. And I kind of stumbled into my agent. A friend of a friend connected me with my agent. But, when she was happy with the book, so she probably made me work, after I had already worked for a couple of years on this book, 8 more months, really hard. They really worked hard with me. We had a book deal in 2 days. I really understand the importance of an agent firsthand, because when they were happy, publishers were happy. So that really is important. And there's so many agents out there. If somebody says no, I think don't take no for an answer.
Oh, really? Keep trying.
Yeah.
And do you think are you always going to write children's books? Would you like to write maybe some adult fiction, or would you like to branch out into a different genre?
When I moved to New York, I said to myself that I wanted to write one of everything. Movie, novel. So I chose picture books to start with. And I'm working on a first chapter book now. So I really need to keep getting better at making picture books. It's a craft, and I'm learning it every day. And so I don't feel like I've in any way mastered that craft yet. I'm still working on that craft. So that takes the bulk of my time, but I am working on a first chapter book, and I'm sure that will be a lengthy process as well.
What about seeing Doug Dennis in another medium? Would you be interested in a cartoon or a movie or a TV show or something? Yeah,
I would love to work on an animated project one day. Doug Dennis could lend himself to a longer story like that. And I've spoken with people a couple of times about turning Doug Dennis into a play. But,
really? Yeah, like a kids play, like a stage play, a puppet show, that type of thing.
Or even just like characters in costume kind of play.
Okay. Well, I think I'd also like to ask you to recommend a book for us. So, I mean, obviously we want everyone to pick up your book, but do you have a particular book that you'd like to recommend? What would you suggest?
I've only looked at the art for this book. I just bought it this week. It's called Slush Mountain.
Slush Mountain, okay.
It looks really cool, but mine is all in Korean, so I have no idea what the actual words say. But it looks great, and I love it. And there's one other book.
So we're recommending Slush Mountain, and we've got one more book to recommend.
I mean, this won the Caldecott this year, so it's no secret. This Is Not My Hat by John Klassen.
So Darren's holding a copy of This Is Not My Hat by John Klassen, and it looks like a very well presented book. Yeah, so perhaps you can look that one up. And Darren, last thing for today, can you recommend us a song as well? I know you've got some very interesting musical tastes.
The song Lay Low.
Lay Low.
I mean, By and By by Lay Low.
By and By by Lay Low. Darren, thank you so much for coming into the studio today. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.